What kind of father are you? Jessica's voice cut through the restaurant noise. You can't even afford a house. I set down my fork, carefully. 6 weeks later, I owned hers. You've never been a real father, you know that. You can't even afford a house. Jessica spat, the public volume of her contempt startling the entire table. I set down my fork, carefully. Marcus snorted into his wine glass, and the table fell into uncomfortable silence. But I just looked at my daughter, the one I'd given everything to, and managed a small smile. Her words cut deep because every dollar I'd ever earned had gone to building her life. College tuition, a lavish wedding, her husband's business. I left that restaurant without a word, but my mind was already working. 6 weeks later, the logistics of my vengeance were complete. But 48 hours earlier, everything had been different. The call came on Tuesday afternoon while I was checking inventory sheets at the warehouse. Jessica's voice bright with the kind of energy that used to mean she'd aced a test or landed a promotion. Dad, we're doing a family dinner Saturday night. Marcus wants to celebrate the coffee shop's expansion. Bring your appetite. The line went dead before I could ask questions. I stood there among the cardboard boxes and shipping pallets, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence where her voice had been. Saturday arrived with Phoenix heat that made the asphalt shimmer. I'd pressed my good shirt, the blue one Jessica said brought out my eyes when she was 12, and driven across town to Salvatore's, the kind of place with cloth napkins and prices that made my warehouse salary feel smaller than usual. The parking lot held vehicles I recognized. Jessica's white Mercedes SUV that I'd helped with the down payment 3 years ago. Marcus's Tesla that he'd bought after his coffee shop started turning profits from my retirement fund investment. My sister Linda's Lexus, and a handful of other luxury cars belonging to Marcus's business friends. The hostess led me through dim lighting and the murmur of expensive conversations. Our table sat near the back, round and large enough for 12. Jessica spotted me first. She rose from her chair with that practiced grace I'd watched develop over 33 years. Her designer dress, probably $800, maybe more, catching the overhead lights as she moved. Her hug felt different, tighter than usual, longer. Dad, she pulled back, hands on my shoulders. You look good. Marcus stood next to her, his hand finding the small of her back with the casual ownership of 7 years of marriage. Daniel, he extended his other hand for a shake. Glad you could make it. I should have known. Restaurant dinners were never just dinners. The table filled quickly. Linda arrived with her husband Tom, both offering quick hugs before claiming seats across from Jessica and Marcus. Then came the cousins, Rachel and David, people I saw maybe twice a year at holidays. Marcus's business partners filtered in. Chad, a venture capitalist with teeth too white to be natural, and Stephen, who owned 3 other coffee franchises across the Phoenix metro area. The last to arrive was Marcus's college friend Brandon, still wearing his realtor blazer with the gold name tag catching light every time he moved. Wine appeared. Appetizers followed. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone, touching but not quite including. Jessica's laugh rang out across the table when Chad told some story about a failed investment in a tech startup. Marcus leaned back in his chair with the confidence of a man who'd forgotten where his seed money came from. The waiter took our orders. I chose the chicken marsala, $28, which made me wince internally, but I couldn't order the cheapest thing on the menu, not in front of everyone. Jessica ordered lobster. Marcus got the porterhouse steak. Their casual ordering, the way they didn't even glance at the right side of the menu where the numbers lived, reminded me of something I'd been trying not to think about. So Daniel, Chad's voice pulled me back to the present. Jessica tells me you're still at the warehouse. How long has that been now? 37 years. The number felt heavier spoken aloud. Started when Jessica was 2. That's dedication. Chad raised his wine glass. The Malbec inside probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Must be satisfying work. The conversation shifted before I could respond. Marcus started talking about the coffee shop expansion, his hands moving as he described the new location in Scottsdale. The custom Italian espresso machines, the architect-designed interior that would cost 6 figures to complete. I listened to him talk about money that had started as my money transformed now into his success story, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Dad helped with the initial investment, Jessica added, her hand covering Marcus's on the table. Couldn't have done it without him. Past tense. Helped. Done. The appetizers arrived. Calamari, bruschetta, some kind of artisan flatbread with goat cheese. Everyone reached across the table, sharing plates and stories. I took a piece of bruschetta and couldn't taste it. The bread turned to paste in my mouth. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? Jessica's voice is suddenly softer, directed at me. You ran alongside me for hours in that parking lot behind our apartment. Grant Street. The memory surfaced unbidden. Her pink bicycle with the white basket. Training wheels that I'd removed too early because she'd begged. The scrapes on her knees when she fell. My hands supporting her back, running until my lungs burned, refusing to let go until she was steady. You were 6. Best dad ever. She smiled, but something about it didn't reach her eyes. Always there when I needed you. Always there. Always giving. The main courses arrived with ceremony. My chicken marsala looked small next to Marcus's steak and Jessica's lobster. The waiter refilled wine glasses around the table. Conversation continued its flow. Real estate markets, investment opportunities, vacation plans. Chad talked about his upcoming trip to Bali. Rachel mentioned her kitchen renovation, $30,000 for custom cabinets and marble countertops. Linda described the new BMW she and Tom were considering. I cut into my chicken, chewed, swallowed. The food might as well have been cardboard. We're thinking about Hawaii for Christmas, Jessica said, her fork pointing at Marcus. Maybe Maui. We found this incredible resort right on the water. Sounds expensive, Linda offered with a smile. We've earned it. Marcus's voice carried that edge of pride. Business is booming. The Scottsdale location is going to triple our revenue by next quarter. My retirement fund tripled into their revenue. The math was simple, even if no one else at the table wanted to do it. Dad, you should come with us. Jessica's invitation hung in the air for exactly 2 seconds before she continued. Oh, but the resort is pretty pricey. Maybe next year when you've saved up. Next year? When I'd saved up. From the warehouse supervisor's salary that barely covered my rent in the small apartment across town, the 1-bedroom with the water stain on the ceiling, and the heater that stopped working every winter. I'm good, I said. The words came out flat. Work's busy around the holidays. The table's attention had already moved on. Marcus launched into another story about a difficult customer, turning it into comedy with practiced timing. Everyone laughed. I moved my fork through the marsala sauce, creating patterns on the plate. Rachel's voice cut through the laughter. Daniel, didn't you always want to travel? I remember you talking about Yellowstone years ago. The question landed like a stone in still water. The ripples of silence spread outward from where I sat. That was a long time ago, I said quietly. Why didn't you ever go? Rachel pressed, genuinely curious. It's not that expensive if you camp. Why didn't I go? The question sat there, obvious and terrible in its innocence. Why didn't I go to Yellowstone with the money I'd spent on Jessica's college education? $83,000 over 4 years at Arizona State. Why didn't I use the savings I'd emptied for her wedding? $95,000 for a single day in May 7 years ago. The reception at the Phoenician Resort with 200 guests and a 4-tier cake and a live band that played until midnight. Why didn't I take that retirement fund and drive to Wyoming instead of handing it over to help Marcus start his business? $147,000 that I'd scraped together over decades of overtime and double shifts and skipped vacations. Jessica needed things, I said. The words felt inadequate. College, the wedding, Marcus's business. Oh, Dad. Jessica's voice dripped with something that wasn't quite affection. You're always so dramatic about money. Dramatic. The word hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't drama, I said slowly. It was everything I had. And we appreciate it. Marcus raised his wine glass. Really, Daniel, we do. Appreciate. Past tense. Transaction complete. No refunds. The waiter cleared plates, offered dessert menus. The table considered options. Tiramisu, creme brulee, chocolate lava cake. I ordered coffee, just coffee, $3.50. The cheapest thing I could order without seeming rude. So modest, Chad laughed, nodding at my coffee cup. Save room for the big spenders, right? The table chuckled. Friendly mockery, the kind that groups use to include outsiders by making them the joke. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. But seriously, Daniel, Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. We wanted everyone here tonight because we have big news. Jessica's hand found his again, their fingers intertwined with the ease of practice. We're buying a house, Jessica announced. A real house. 4 bedrooms in Paradise Valley. Paradise Valley, where houses started at $1 million and climb fast. Congratulations, the table chorused. Linda actually clapped. Chad raised his glass again. It's a big step, Marcus continued. Jessica's boutique is doing well. The coffee shops are expanding. We've got the capital lined up. Time to stop renting and build some real equity. Stop renting. Build equity. The language of people who'd never worried about rent. That's wonderful, I said. The words felt like they belonged to someone else. We were thinking, Jessica said, her voice taking on that careful tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. Dad, you're still in that tiny apartment, right? The 1-bedroom near the warehouse? Every eye at the table turned toward me. The attention felt like heat. It works, I said, but you could do better. Jessica's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus and I were talking, and we thought maybe it's time you looked at downsizing your expenses. Maybe get a roommate? Share costs? Downsizing. Roommate? At 61 years old, after 37 years of warehouse work and giving away everything I'd ever earned. I'm managing fine, assured Tony, I said. Are you, though? Jessica's voice sharpened. Be honest, Dad. When's the last time you bought something nice for yourself? When's the last time you went anywhere or did anything? You're always just scraping by. Scraping by. The phrase echoed in my skull. I gave you what I had, I said quietly. So you wouldn't have to scrape by. And we're grateful. Marcus's tone suggested the opposite. But at some point, you have to take responsibility for your own financial situation. We can't keep worrying about whether you're okay. Can't keep worrying, as if they ever had. I never asked you to worry, I said. The coffee had gone cold in my cup. That's the problem. Jessica's voice rose slightly. You never ask for anything. You just sit there in your little apartment with your little job, making everyone feel guilty. The table went silent. Even Chad stopped smiling. I make you feel guilty? The question came out softer than I intended. Yes, Jessica's eyes flashed. Every time we do something nice, every time we buy something or go somewhere, there you are in the background, reminding us that you gave us money, like we owe you something. You don't owe me anything, I said. The words tasted like ash. I gave it freely. Then stop acting like a martyr. Jessica's voice cut through the restaurant noise. What kind of father are you? You can't even afford a house. The words landed like blows. The table shifted uncomfortably. Linda looked at her plate. Rachel studied her wine glass. Marcus's business friends suddenly found the wallpaper fascinating. Jessica, Linda started, but Jessica wasn't finished. You've never been a real father. You know that? Jessica's voice carried across nearby tables. Other diners turned to look. Just a burden. Always scraping by. Always embarrassing us with your worn-out clothes and your cheap car in your tiny apartment. Do you know how it feels to tell people what my father does? Oh, he's a warehouse supervisor. Like that's something to be proud of. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Our table sat in a bubble of tension while the world continued elsewhere. I was proud, I said quietly, of giving you better. Better? Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. You gave me debt and obligation and constant worry about whether you're okay. That's not better. That's burden. Marcus raised his wine glass. His smile had an edge I'd never seen before. To Daniel, he said loudly, the king of nothing. A few people at the table gave uncomfortable laughs. Chad smiled uncertainly. Stephen looked away. Maybe a homeless shelter would be more appropriate, Marcus continued, his voice carrying that casual cruelty of someone who'd never known real struggle. At least then you'd have company at your level. The king of nothing. The phrase echoed in the sudden silence. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet. Everyone at the table looked up at me. Jessica with defiance, Marcus with that cruel smile, Linda with something that might have been pity, the others with varying degrees of discomfort. "Excuse me," I said. My voice came out steady, calm. "I need to go." I pulled out my wallet. The leather was worn thin at the edges, cracked where it folded. Inside, 320s, grocery money for the week. I placed them on the table next to my coffee cup. "For my meal," I said. "Dad, don't be dramatic." Jessica's voice followed me as I turned. "We're just being honest." Honest. The word chased me through the restaurant, past other tables where families ate together without cruelty, past the hostess stand, out into the Phoenix night where the air was still hot at 9 p.m. and tasted like dust and exhaust. My truck sat in the parking lot among the luxury vehicles. A 2003 Ford F-150 with rust spots on the wheel wells and a dent in the passenger door from when I'd backed into a pole 5 years ago. The air conditioning worked intermittently. The radio only picked up AM stations. But it was paid off, and it ran, and it was mine. I sat behind the wheel for a long time before I started the engine. Through the restaurant window, I could see our table. Jessica was laughing again. Marcus had his arm around her shoulders. The conversation had moved on. They'd already forgotten I was there. The king of nothing. I drove home with the windows down because the AC had decided not to work tonight. The hot air whipped through the cab, carrying the smell of creosote and dessert. Traffic lights turned from red to green to red again as I moved through the city streets, heading east toward the neighborhood where rents were cheap and nobody asked questions. My apartment complex looked worse at night. The security light above the entrance flickered with a bad ballast. Graffiti decorated the dumpsters near the parking lot. Someone's broken air conditioning unit dripped water onto the concrete walkway, creating a dark stain that never quite dried. Unit 2B, second floor, corner unit. I'd lived here for 11 years, ever since Jessica graduated college and moved into her first apartment downtown. The rent was $650 a month, utilities included, the cheapest place I could find that wasn't actively dangerous. Inside, the apartment smelled like the Chinese takeout I'd had 3 days ago. The kitchen was a galley style, barely wide enough to turn around in. The living room held a couch I'd bought used in 2008 and a TV that still had a DVD player built in. The bedroom was just large enough for my double bed and a dresser. The bathroom tiles were cracked, the grout permanently stained brown. This was what I'd kept for myself after giving Jessica and Marcus everything else. I sat on the couch in the dark for a while, not bothering with lights. The traffic noise from the street filtered through the thin walls. Upstairs, my neighbor was watching television too loudly again. Someone in another unit was yelling in Spanish. The king of nothing sat in his kingdom and thought about bridges burning. But I didn't think about bridges for long. I was already reaching for my phone. Richard Montoya answered on the third ring. "Daniel, it's late. Everything okay?" "I need to ask about something," I said. "Marcus's coffee shop, the business finances." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "You know, I don't usually discuss other people's business." "I know, but I need to know." More silence. Richard and I went back 23 years, back when he'd been a warehouse manager and I'd been a new hire. He'd worked his way up from the floor to regional management to early retirement, then started buying investment properties. Smart investments, careful decisions, turning a warehouse manager's salary into real wealth over decades. "Why are you asking?" Richard finally said. "Because I just had dinner with my daughter and son-in-law," I said, "and I need to know if I'm the fool they think I am." Another pause. I heard Richard exhale slowly. "Leverage to the hilt," he said finally. "Bad location choice on the Scottsdale expansion. High rent, low foot traffic. They've missed 3 payments to Valley National Bank. The original coffee shop is profitable, but barely covering the debt service on the new place." The information settled over me like a weight. "How do you know this?" I asked. "I know people, and I keep an eye on commercial real estate in the area." Richard paused. "Daniel, what happened at dinner?" I told him. Not everything. I couldn't quite make myself repeat every word, but enough. The questions about my apartment, the comments about scraping by. Jessica's voice saying, "What kind of father are you?" Marcus raising his glass to toast the king of nothing. The line went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "My son did something similar," Richard finally said, his voice rough. 15 years ago. I paid for his medical school, helped him set up his practice, gave him everything I could. And when my wife got sick and I needed help, he told me he was too busy building his career. Said I should have planned better for retirement. What did you do? Nothing at the time. Swallowed it. Tried to understand his perspective. Made excuses. Richard's voice hardened. Worst decision I ever made. Taught him he could treat me like nothing and face no consequences. We barely speak now. Maybe twice a year and it's all surface. No real relationship left. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Richard paused. That building where they live. Their apartment. You know it? The Meridian Towers, downtown. I've been watching that property. Owner's having financial trouble. Wants to sell. It's a good building, decent location, solid rental income. I've been considering making an offer. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because maybe there's a way to show your daughter and son-in-law what the king of nothing can actually do. Richard's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. You interested in becoming a landlord? I don't have that kind of money, I said. I gave it all away, remember? You have sweat equity, management experience, and I have capital looking for the right investment. Richard paused. Partnership. I'll handle the purchase. You'll handle the property management. We split the profits, and you get to have a conversation with your daughter about rent. The idea hung in the air between us, dangerous and tempting. That's revenge, I said slowly. No, Richard corrected. Revenge is irrational. This is business. This is showing people who've built their lives on your sacrifice exactly where they stand without your support. This is teaching a lesson they'll remember. Think about it, Richard continued. I'll send you the building details tomorrow. Look them over. If you want to move forward, we can have lawyers draw up partnership papers by end of week. If not, no hard feelings. The call ended. I sat in the dark with my phone in my hand, thinking about Jessica's face across the restaurant table, the casual cruelty in her voice, Marcus's toast, the silence from everyone else at the table while they tore me apart with words. I thought about 37 years of warehouse work, overtime shifts when Jessica needed new clothes for school, double shifts when her college tuition came due, holidays spent working so I could afford Christmas presents that got more expensive every year as she got older. The wedding that I'd known was too expensive, but couldn't say no to because she'd looked at me with those same eyes she'd had at 6 years old, asking me to remove the training wheels, promising she was ready. The king of nothing sat in his kingdom and made a decision. I called Richard back. I'm in, I said. Let's do it. The next morning, Sunday, I met Richard at a coffee shop, not one of Marcus's franchises. We sat at a corner table with the building financials spread between us. Richard had been thorough. The Meridian Towers held 42 units across 12 floors. Current occupancy rate at 93%. Average rent $1,500 per month for one bedrooms, $2,000 for two bedrooms. Jessica and Marcus's unit was a two-bedroom on the 8th floor. Purchase price is $1.6 million, Richard said, his finger tapping the bottom line. Owners motivated. Property appraised at $1.85 last year. We can get it for $1.5 if we move fast. That's a lot of money, I said. That's a good investment. Richard pulled out another sheet. Property management companies in the area charge 8 to 10% of gross rent. That's roughly $7,000 per month. Instead, you manage it directly for $7,000 salary plus 50% of net profits after expenses. The numbers were dizzying. $7,000 a month was more than I made at the warehouse. What do I know about property management? I asked. You know inventory management, logistics, personnel problems, and budgets. Richard smiled slightly. A warehouse is just a building full of things that need organizing. An apartment building is a building full of people who need organizing. Skills transfer. We spent 3 hours going through the numbers. Maintenance costs, property taxes, insurance, vacancy rates, capital improvements needed over the next 5 years. Richard had projections, comparables, market analysis. He'd clearly been planning this for a while. Why partner with me? I finally asked. You could hire any property manager. Because I trust you, Richard said simply, and because I was where you are 15 years ago. Except I didn't have anyone offer me a chance to stand back up. So I'm offering you that chance now. We shook hands across the table. His grip was firm. Let's show them what the king of nothing can do, Richard said. The next 6 weeks moved faster than I expected. Richard's lawyers drew up the partnership papers. 70% equity for Richard, who was putting up the capital, 30% for me as sweat equity and ongoing management. We made the offer on the Meridian Towers Monday afternoon. The owner accepted by Wednesday. Inspection happened the following week. The building was solid, no major issues, just normal wear and deferred maintenance from an owner who'd stopped caring. Closing was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, I studied. Richard sent me 3 books on property management. I read them at night in my apartment, making notes in the margins, learning about fair housing laws and maintenance schedules and tenant relations. I researched rental management software. I drove past the Meridian Towers a dozen times, studying the building from different angles, noticing the landscaping that needed updating, the entrance that needed better lighting, the parking lot that could use fresh striping. I didn't tell Jessica and Marcus. Didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out. They didn't contact me either. The silence stretched across the weeks like a wound that wouldn't quite heal. At the warehouse, I kept working, showing up on time, checking inventory, managing the loading crews. My supervisor, Jack, noticed something different. You seem lighter, he said one afternoon while we were reviewing shipping manifests. Something good happen? Maybe, I said. I'll tell you when I'm sure. Closing day arrived on a Friday in late October. Richard and I met at the title company at 2 p.m. The seller looked tired, a man in his late 60s who'd clearly stopped caring about the property years ago. The papers took 40 minutes to sign, electronic signatures, wire transfers, keys changing hands. At 3:15 p.m., Richard and I walked out as the owners of the Meridian Towers. Partnership agreement says you can't make major changes without my approval, Richard said as we stood in the parking lot. But day-to-day management is your call, including rent negotiations. I know, I said. Whatever you're planning, Richard continued, make it smart, not just angry. I drove to the Meridian Towers that evening, used my new key to enter the management office on the first floor. The previous owner had left most of the records, lease agreements, maintenance logs, tenant information. I found Jessica and Marcus's file, lease signed 18 months ago, monthly rent of $2,050 for their 2-bedroom unit, lease coming up for renewal in 60 days. I sat in the office chair, cheap plastic that squeaked when I moved, and looked at their rental application from 18 months ago. Marcus's income from the coffee shop, Jessica's income from her boutique. Combined, they'd made just enough to qualify at the standard income-to-rent ratio of 3-to-1. Now, according to Richard's information, the coffee shop was bleeding money. Jessica's boutique probably wasn't doing much better, and their lease was about to need renewal. I drafted the notice that evening. Professional, formal, exactly according to the legal requirements. Dear residents, we hope this letter finds you well. We are writing to inform you that the Meridian Towers has recently come under new ownership and management. Your current lease agreement expires on December 31st. We would like to discuss lease renewal terms at your earliest convenience. Please note that rental rates are being adjusted across the property to reflect current market conditions. Your new monthly rent, effective January 1st, will be $6,000. Please contact our office within 10 days to discuss renewal options. Sincerely, Property Management. The Meridian Towers $6,000, triple their current rent, more than they could possibly afford with the coffee shop failing and the boutique barely breaking even. I printed the notice, addressed the envelope. Unit 8B, Jessica and Marcus Patterson. The envelope sat on the desk in front of me while I considered what I was doing. This wasn't just business. This was personal. This was showing them what it felt like to be cornered by someone else's decisions. This was teaching them that calling someone nothing has consequences. I sealed the envelope. Hand delivery would be better, more direct. I wanted to see their faces. Saturday afternoon, I drove to the Meridian Towers, parked in the management spot near the entrance, took the elevator to the 8th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in beige that probably needed replacing. Unit 8B was halfway down on the left. I knocked. Jessica opened the door. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. The casual weekend look of someone who didn't have to work today. "Dad?" Her face showed surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I'm the new property manager," I said, handed her the envelope. "Lease renewal notice." She took it automatically, her brain not quite processing what I'd said. "Property manager?" she repeated. "The building sold 3 days ago," I said. "I'm handling all tenant relations now, including lease renewals." Jessica opened the envelope. I watched her eyes scan the letter, saw them widen when she got to the new rent amount. $6,000? Her voice rose. "This has to be a mistake." "It's not." "Dad, this is insane. We're paying $2,000 now. You can't just triple our rent." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "Property is under new ownership. Market rate adjustments are standard. You'll find comparable two-bedroom units in this area rent for between $5,500 and $7,000 per month." I'd done my research. The numbers were accurate. Marcus appeared behind Jessica. "Daniel, what's going on?" "He says he's the new property manager," Jessica said, her voice tight, "and he's trying to triple our rent." Marcus took the letter from her hand, read it. His face went from confused to angry in seconds. "This is bullshit," he said. "You can't do this." "I can, and I am," I said. "You have 60 days to decide if you're renewing at the new rate or vacating the property." "This is revenge," Jessica said. Her voice shook. "Because of what I said at dinner. This is you trying to punish us." "This is business," I corrected. "You wanted me to take responsibility for my own financial situation." "Well, I did. I made an investment, and now I'm managing that investment." "By pricing us out of our home?" Marcus's voice rose. "That's not business, that's vindictive." "Welcome to the free market," I said, "where people who can't afford rent have to move somewhere cheaper." I believe the term you used was downsizing. Maybe you should consider that. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, please, we can't afford $6,000 a month." "Then I suggest you find something in your price range," I said. "There are plenty of apartments across town. Smaller ones. Maybe one-bedrooms. Maybe in neighborhoods that aren't as nice as this one. But they'll fit your budget." "You're really doing this," Marcus said slowly. "You're really going to kick us out." "I'm offering you a lease renewal at market rate," I corrected. "Whether you accept it or not is your choice." I turned to leave. Jessica's voice stopped me. "What happened to you?" she asked. "You were never like this." I looked back at her, my daughter, 33 years old, still beautiful, still the same girl I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, drove to college orientations and dance recitals in friends' houses, but also the woman who'd called me nothing, who'd mocked me in front of family, who'd built her life on my sacrifice, and then tried to bury me with shame for not having more to give. "I learned a lesson," I said quietly, "from the best teachers. You showed me that giving everything away just makes you the king of nothing. So I stopped giving, started keeping. And it turns out the king of nothing can actually do quite a bit when he stops letting people take from him." The elevator doors closed between us. I rode down to the lobby alone. The following week, I received a call from a lawyer. Jessica and Marcus had consulted an attorney about the rent increase. The lawyer informed me, professionally carefully, that while the increase was legally permissible under Arizona law, it was unusually aggressive, and his clients were exploring all options. "Your clients have 53 days to decide whether to renew," I said. "After that, we'll need possession of the unit for the next tenant." "Mr. Patterson," the lawyer said, his tone shifting to something more personal. "Off the record, is there any way to negotiate a more reasonable increase? These are difficult economic times." "I'm aware," I said. "I've been living through difficult economic times for 61 years. Your clients are just now discovering what that feels like." The lawyer sighed. "I'll convey your position to my clients." The call ended. I sat in the management office. I'd been spending more time here than at my apartment and thought about difficult economic times, about how I'd stretched every dollar until it screamed. about how I'd worked double shifts and skipped meals and worn clothes until they fell apart so Jessica could have name-brand shoes and Marcus could have seed capital for a coffee shop that was now failing. Richard stopped by the office that afternoon. Heard you had a visit from a lawyer. Word travels fast, I said. Property management community is small. Richard leaned against the desk. How are you holding up? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Richard studied me carefully. You're doing the right thing business-wise. But this is your daughter. That's complicated. She made it simple, I said. She told me exactly what she thought of me. In front of family, in front of strangers. She made it very clear where I stand in her life. And now you're showing her where she stands in yours, Richard said. I get it. I did something similar with my son, eventually. Different circumstances, same principle. Teaching people they can't treat you like nothing and expect you to keep giving. Did it work? I asked. With your son? Richard was quiet for a moment. He apologized, eventually, 3 years later. And we have something like a relationship now. Not what it was, not what it could have been, but something. Do you regret it? No, Richard said firmly, because the alternative was letting him keep treating me like an ATM. And that's not a relationship either. At least this way, there's honesty, painful but honest. He left and I sat alone with the files in the silence. The next development came 2 weeks later. Jessica called my cell phone at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday. I'd been reviewing maintenance requests. The building had accumulated a lot of deferred repairs under the previous owner. Dad? Her voice was different, smaller. Can we talk? In person? About the lease? I asked. About everything. We met the next evening at a coffee shop. Neutral territory, not one of Marcus's failing franchises. Jessica arrived 15 minutes late, her eyes red-rimmed, her usual polish gone. She ordered a latte she didn't drink and sat across from me at a corner table. Marcus and I are in trouble, she said without preamble. The Scottsdale location is bleeding money. The bank wants their payments. We're juggling credit, cards to cover expenses, and now this rent increase. You built a house of cards, I said quietly, on money you didn't earn. Money you gave us, she corrected. You gave it freely. You said we didn't owe you anything. And you don't, I agreed. But that doesn't mean you get to call me nothing. Doesn't mean you get to mock me in front of family. Doesn't mean you get to treat me like an embarrassment and expect me to keep supporting your lifestyle. Jessica's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. I'm sorry about what I said. I was angry and frustrated, and I took it out on you. Angry about what? I asked. What did I do to make you angry? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on her coffee. You made me feel guilty, she finally said. Every time I bought something nice or did something expensive, I thought about you in that tiny apartment, working at the warehouse, wearing the same old clothes, and it made me feel like I couldn't enjoy what I had. So you decided to cut me down instead, I said. Make me small enough that you didn't have to feel guilty anymore. Maybe, she whispered. I don't know. I just wanted to stop feeling like I owed you something. You don't owe me money, I said. You never did. But you owed me basic human decency. You owed me respect. You owed me the acknowledgement that I sacrificed everything so you could have more than I did. Tears ran down Jessica's face. I know. You're right. And I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything, I said. Sorry doesn't make the rent decrease. Sorry doesn't undo what you said or how you said it. Then what do you want? Her voice rose slightly. What will make this right? I want you to understand what it feels like, I said. To build something and watch someone else take credit. To give everything and be called nothing. To work for 37 years and have your own daughter act ashamed of you. Jessica sobbed into her hands. Other people in the coffee shop glanced over. I sat quietly and waited. We'll have to move, she said eventually. There's no way we can afford $6,000 a month. Marcus's business is failing. My boutique barely breaks even. We'll have to find something cheaper, smaller. Sounds like you'll have to downsize, I said, the word she'd used at dinner. Maybe get a roommate. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. You're really not going to help us. I helped you for 33 years, I said. Gave you everything I had. My turn to help myself now. The coffee shop meeting ended with Jessica crying and me walking away. I felt something in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, not quite pain. Something harder to name. Over the following weeks, I watched their situation deteriorate from a distance. Marcus closed the Scottsdale location, cutting his losses. Jessica put her boutique up for sale. They listed the Mercedes and the Tesla online, desperate for cash. And they gave notice they'd be vacating Unit 8B at the end of their lease term. I stood in their apartment after they'd moved out. They'd left it clean. That was something. But the space felt hollow now. The high ceilings and the city views and the modern fixtures were just empty stage dressing without anyone there to perform for. They'd moved to a one-bedroom apartment in Tempe, according to the forwarding address they'd provided. A neighborhood with lower rent and fewer amenities. Marcus had taken a job at some corporate office, pushing papers. Jessica was working retail while she figured out what to do next. The king of nothing had taught them something about consequences, but teaching lessons left me sitting alone in an empty apartment, wondering what I'd actually won. Richard found me there an hour later. Heard they moved out. This morning, I confirmed. Unit's ready for the next tenant. How do you feel? Richard asked. Tired, I said honestly. Angry still. Sad, guilty, vindicated. All of it at once. That's normal, Richard said. When my son and I finally had our reckoning, I felt the same way. Winning doesn't feel as good as you think it will when you're winning against your own family. Then why do it? I asked. Because the alternative is worse, Richard said. The alternative is letting them think they can treat you that way forever, teaching them that your love is unconditional even when their respect isn't. That's not healthy for anyone. He had a point, but it didn't make the empty apartment feel less hollow. The Meridian Towers thrived under new management. I threw myself into the work, fixing deferred maintenance, improving common areas, building relationships with good tenants. The vacancy rate dropped. Rent collection improved. The building started feeling like something to be proud of instead of something barely maintained. My partnership with Richard paid off. After expenses, the building netted about $12,000 per month in profit. My 50% share plus my management salary meant I was earning more money than I'd seen in my entire life. I moved out of my old apartment, rented a 2-bedroom unit in a better neighborhood. Not as nice as the Meridian Towers, but clean, safe, with working appliances and no permanent stains. I bought new clothes, got my truck serviced properly for the first time in years, started eating at restaurants that weren't fast food. The king of nothing was building a different kind of kingdom, but success felt incomplete without purpose beyond revenge. Richard noticed. You're restless, he said one day in late January. Making good money, doing good work, but something's missing. I keep thinking about other people, and I said, people like me, who gave everything away and got nothing back, who got called nothing by the people they sacrificed for. There are a lot of them, Richard agreed, more than you'd think. The idea came slowly, then all at once. What if we helped them? I asked. People who've been where I was, who need a chance to stand back up. Richard leaned back in his chair. You want to start a charity? Not exactly. I pulled out my phone, opening the Notes app where I'd been sketching ideas. A fund for people who've given everything to family and got betrayed for it. Help them rebuild. Give them resources and support, and maybe just acknowledgement that they're not nothing. Fun for the forgotten, Richard said quietly. I like it. We spent the next 2 months building the framework. Richard contributed $100,000 to start the fund. I added $50,000, money that still felt unreal to have. We set up a board, developed application criteria, partnered with local social services to identify people who needed help. The fund offered multiple types of support: rent assistance, job training, small business grants, legal help, counseling services. Everything designed to help people rebuild after being devastated by family betrayal. Applications started coming in. The stories were heartbreaking. Parents who'd funded their children's lives only to be discarded. Siblings who'd supported family businesses then got pushed out. Spouses who'd sacrificed careers for their partners then got divorced and left with nothing. We helped a 63-year-old woman who'd paid for her son's medical school and then been told she was too much of a burden to help when she got sick. We helped a 57-year-old man who'd funded his daughter's startup, then got fired when she brought in professional management. We helped a 49-year-old mother who'd raised her sister's children while her sister built a career, only to be told she was just the babysitter when she needed support. Each story echoed mine. Each person carried that same weight of being called nothing after giving everything. We opened a community center in April, a storefront space in a strip mall. Nothing fancy, but clean and welcoming. Coffee and snacks, comfortable chairs, meeting rooms for support groups. A place where the forgotten could gather and remember they were something. The center's opening day brought out 47 people. They filed in quietly, tentatively, like people used to being overlooked. Richard and I stood at the front of the main room while everyone found seats. "This is for the forgotten," I said. My voice carried across the room. "For those who gave their all and were pushed aside. We see you. We're here." A woman in the back row started crying. Others nodded. The recognition in their eyes was worth everything. The support groups met weekly. People shared stories, offered advice, provided the kind of understanding that only comes from shared experience. We brought in counselors, financial advisors, career coaches. We helped people file lawsuits against family members who'd actually stolen from them. We connected people with job opportunities and housing assistance. The fund grew. Local news picked up the story, "Warehouse Supervisor Creates Charity for Family Betrayal Victims," and donations started coming in. People who'd been through similar experiences contributed. Some gave money. Others volunteered time. The fund became something bigger than my revenge against Jessica and Marcus. It became a movement acknowledging a type of pain that society usually ignored. Jessica sent a letter in June. Handwritten, 3 pages long, arrived at the community center. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't see you. Please, let's talk." The letter sat on my desk for 3 days before I read it properly. She wrote about how much she missed me, about how she'd been in therapy and realized how badly she treated me, about how Marcus was too proud to apologize, but she knew he felt terrible too, about how they were struggling but learning and growing and trying to be better people. "I know I can't undo what I said," she wrote, "but I want to try to repair what we had. You're my father. I love you. Please give me a chance." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer with all the other paperwork from the fund. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, not because I wasn't capable of forgiveness, but because Jessica's letter still centered herself, her growth, her therapy, her realization. It asked for another chance without acknowledging that she'd already had 33 years of chances that she'd used to build a life on my sacrifice while treating me like nothing. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday we'd have a conversation. But not yet. Not while I was still building something that mattered more than repairing a relationship that she'd broken. The fun became my purpose. I cut back my hours at the warehouse, finally after 37 years, to focus on the community center. I met with applicants, reviewed cases, attended support groups. I watched people transform from broken to standing, from ashamed to proud, from nothing to something. Richard and I met quarterly to review fund finances. "You've helped over 300 people in 6 months," he said at our August meeting. "That's remarkable." "It's not enough," I said. "There are thousands more who need this." "You can't save everyone," Richard said gently. "No," I agreed, "but I can try to save the ones I reach." The Meridian Towers ran smoothly under professional management now. I'd hired an assistant property manager, a competent woman named Maria, who handled day-to-day issues while I focused on the fun. Jessica and Marcus's old apartment had rented to a young couple, both teachers, who paid their rent on time and never complained about anything. Life settled into something resembling peace. Not happiness exactly. The wound Jessica had opened still existed, but purpose, direction, the satisfaction of building something that mattered. I saw Jessica once, in September, at a grocery store across town. She was alone pushing a cart with generic brands and store label items. She looked tired, older than her 33 years. She saw me at the same time I saw her. We stood in the cereal aisle for a long moment. Neither of us spoke. Her eyes said everything: apology, shame, sadness, hope. My eyes probably said something too, though I wasn't sure what. I nodded once. She nodded back. Then I continued shopping, and she did the same. That was enough. For now. Maybe forever. The fund continued to grow. By December, we'd helped 512 people. The community center expanded into a second location. Richard matched every dollar donated by others, turning the fund into something with real financial power. We'd given out over $2 million in assistance, loans, grants, and services. I turned 62 in November. Richard took me to dinner at a steakhouse, the kind with white tablecloths and prices that didn't make me wince anymore. "You've built something remarkable," he said over dessert. "I'm proud to be part of it." "Couldn't have done it without you," I said honestly. "You did the hard part," Richard corrected. "I just provided capital. You provided the vision, the heart, the understanding of what these people need because you've been there." We raised our glasses. Not to toast the king of nothing, but to toast something else entirely. A different kind of kingdom, built not on revenge but on redemption. Not on taking from others, but on giving to those who'd already given everything. I still thought about Jessica sometimes, wondered how she was doing, whether she and Marcus had figured things out, whether they'd learned anything from losing everything they'd built on my sacrifice, whether they ever thought about me beyond the guilt and the loss and the consequences. But those thoughts didn't consume me anymore. They were just small aches in a life that had grown larger than revenge. I'd stopped being the king of nothing. I'd stopped being defined by what I'd given away or what had been taken from me. I'd become something else, someone else. A man who'd learned that the opposite of nothing wasn't everything. It was enough, enough purpose, enough meaning, enough impact on other people's lives to justify my own. The warehouse finally became my past in December. I gave notice after 37 years. My supervisor, Jack, shook my hand on my last day. "Going to do the fun full time?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It's time." "Good for you," Jack said. "You found something that matters. Not many people do." I drove away from the warehouse for the last time without looking back. 37 years of overtime and double shifts, and skipped breaks and worn-out boots. All of it leading to this moment when I could finally say, I'd given the warehouse enough. I'd given Jessica enough. I'd given everyone enough. Now I was giving to people who'd done the same, and that felt like coming home. The fund's first anniversary celebration in January brought out over 200 people, recipients, volunteers, donors, staff. We'd moved to a larger venue, a community center downtown that we'd rented for the evening. Richard stood at the front of the room while everyone found seats, his voice carrying over the crowd. "A year ago, Daniel came to me with an idea," Richard began. "Help people who'd been forgotten, people who'd given everything and been told they were nothing. I thought it was a good idea. I was wrong. It's not a good idea. It's a necessary one." Applause rippled through the room. Richard continued. "We've helped over 500 people rebuild their lives. We've distributed over $2 million. We've opened 2 community centers. But more than that, we've created a space where people can be seen, where their sacrifices are acknowledged, where being called nothing doesn't mean you are nothing." More applause. Richard gestured to me. "Daniel, come up here." I walked to the front of the room. Hundreds of faces looked back at me. People I'd helped. People who'd helped me. People who understood what it meant to give everything and have it thrown back in your face. "This is for the forgotten," I said, my voice steady. "For those who gave their all and were pushed aside. We see you. We're here. And together, we're not nothing. We're something. We're enough." The room erupted in applause. People stood. Someone started chanting, "We see you," and others joined in until the whole room echoed with the words. I stood at the front and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride exactly, not happiness, but something close to peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've taken your pain and transformed it into purpose. Jessica's letter still sat in my desk drawer, unanswered. Maybe it would stay there forever. Maybe someday I'd pull it out and write a response. But either way, I'd stopped letting her define me. I was no longer the king of nothing. I was no longer Jessica's father first and Daniel second. I was a man who'd learned that giving to those who can't give back isn't weakness, it's strength. That helping the forgotten meant remembering yourself. That the opposite of being nothing wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Richard clapped me on the shoulder as the applause died down. You did it, he said quietly. You turned your worst moment into other people's best chance. I looked out at the crowd, saw their faces, knew their stories, understood their pain because it was my pain too. We did it, I corrected. All of us, together. The celebration continued late into the evening. People shared stories, made connections, found community and shared experience. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting thanks, offering encouragement. These were my people now. The forgotten, the pushed aside, the ones who'd given everything and been called nothing. And together we were something. The drive home that night took me past the Meridian Towers. Lights glowed in windows where people lived. Their lives, Unit 8B, was dark. The teacher couple was probably already asleep. The building stood solid and profitable, a reminder that the king of nothing had learned to build kingdoms after all. But the real kingdom wasn't the building. It was the fund, the community center, the 512 people who'd been helped, the hundreds more who would be helped next year and the year after. The movement we were building around, acknowledging a type of pain that too many people carried alone. I parked in front of my apartment, the nice two-bedroom in the good neighborhood that I could finally afford. Inside, the space was clean and comfortable. Furniture I'd chosen, clothes that fit properly, a refrigerator full of food I actually wanted to eat. The king of nothing's new kingdom was quiet, small, but it was mine, built not on what I'd given away, but on what I'd finally kept for myself. My dignity, my worth. My understanding that giving everything away doesn't make you noble, it just makes you empty. I'd stopped being empty, started being full, not with revenge or anger or bitterness, though those still existed somewhere in the background, but with purpose, with meaning, with the knowledge that I'd taken my pain and turned it into something that helped others carry theirs. Jessica's letter stayed in the drawer, maybe permanently, maybe not. But either way, I'd moved on from needing her acknowledgement to find my own. The forgotten man had finally been found. Not by his daughter, not by anyone else, but by himself. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments below.